Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So let's talk about Saltmarsh and where I would rank it in the list of DDO's expansion. So I did a video several months ago, really detailed. I went through everything, all the expansions, and I ranked them in terms of the quality of the content. I'll link that video below if you want to check that out. But that video was obviously made before Saltmarsh. So some people have asked me where would I rank Saltmarsh? And let's just talk about it. I figured I'd make a video. So, the thing about Saltmarsh is it's labeled as a mini expansion. So, when you ask me the question, where would I rank Saltmarsh? I wouldn't rank it at all. I think it belongs in a different box because it is labeled as a mini expansion and was intended to be a smaller scale project than the other expansions. Therefore, it's not really fair to compare something like Saltmarsh to, say, some vast expansion like Menace of the Underdark. So that's my answer, is I wouldn't rank it at all because I don't think it's fair. But if I must rank it, then fine, we can talk about that, where I would rank it if I was forced to. We're going to put it in the same box as the other expansions. Then I think I would put it, well, before I get into that, let's just look at this poll where this was a poll on the forums recently where everyone was asked to basically vote for their favorite expansion. Most people said Ravenloft, not too much of a surprise. Second was Menace of the Underdark. Third was Sharn. Fourth was Feywild. And fifth was Saltmarsh. And last was Shadowfell. No one ranked, asked for, or voted for that as the best expansion. But here's my thoughts on it, okay? I'll stop delaying. Hey, first of all, Ravenloft, Menace of the Underdark, Sharn, Feywild. I don't think there's any argument, at least in my mind, there's no argument for ranking Saltmarsh above those if we're going to compare it to the mini expansions when we're talking quality of content, just because these were bigger scale projects. I don't think it's fair, even if you want to try to ignore quantity of content, it's kind of hard to do that because the quantity of the content and the abundance of quests in some of these packs adds to the immersion and the overall quality of the pack. So it's all I'm saying is it's hard to ignore quality entirely. But so when we're talking about something like Menace of the Underdark, I mean, it's this vast adventure where you start from the Lords of Dust chain in the harbor and you venture your way to Evening Star, transversing to a new, all the way to the Forgotten Realms, and you have giant public area of Evening Star. You've got three really well done, except for maybe the Demon Web, explore areas. You've got tons of quests. You've got a raid, which, Saltmarsh doesn't have. I don't think you can really, I don't see how you rank it above it unless you just look at, just ignore quality entirely and just go into really subjective things. But if we're going to talk the overall quality of the offering, like I can't rank it over any of these because of that. I mean, Ravenloft, there's so much more effort put into Ravenloft than Saltmarsh, which is obvious. They obviously put tons of effort into quests like Invitation to Dinner, detailing Strahd's castle. There's one really in-depth raid, and two Baba's Hut's kind of not as detailed and intricate, but it's still a raid. I mean, Saltmarsh doesn't have any raids, so I can't rank it above that. I mean, we get to stuff like Sharn. They tried to do new things with, say, like the Source Sled mechanic in Just Business. There were two raids included in this pack. The adventure area in Sharn, the Cogs, was very well done, and it works really well with the quests out there, kind of having to navigate your way through it, which makes it feel more like a kind of an adventure experience. And then we have Feywild, which just visually, I think Feywild is the best visually of any of the expansions. It looks great. The artwork's really well done. I know there's the Feywild. Feywild was, I think, cut some corners, like only had one raid and stuff, but at least it had a raid. At least it had that for it. It felt more complete to me than Saltmarsh does if we're going to consider Saltmarsh to be in the same box, which, again, I don't think is fair. So when it comes down to it, I think the only expansion you could really argue that it might be better than is Shadowfell Conspiracy. And that's just because the Shadowfell Conspiracy is about on the same level in terms of the amount of quests that are offered. You look at the packs like Wayloon and the Stormhorns, you can compare that to what's offered in Saltmarsh. Now, personally, I would still, if forced to rank, I would still put Shadowfell Conspiracy above Saltmarsh. I would put Saltmarsh last, just because I think the Stormhorns, quests like What Goes Up, the Explorer area there, I think the quality, particularly in that quest in the Explorer area, I know some of the other quests in Stormhorns are kind of not. They're just okay, like breaking the ranks. Um, but thing is, I still feel like the experience you get from Shadowfell still feels like more than what you get from Saltmarsh. Not that Saltmarsh isn't good. It's just I don't think the quality there stands up to the Stormhorns. Granted, Wayloon, the other part of the Shadowfell conspiracy, is kind of okay, as I talked about in my prior video, um, going over the expansions. But I still think what goes up is definitely better than any of the quests offered in Saltmarsh. I think the Explore area in Stormhorns is better, uh, quite a lot better actually than what's offered in Saltmarsh, which is why I would rank it higher. That said, Saltmarsh has, obviously, if you're just comparing it to Stormhorns, obviously Saltmarsh has more quests. Though, when you look at the other side of the Shadowfell conspiracy, Wayloon, those quests probably, I can't really say that Saltmarsh is necessarily better than those. So, I personally, because of how much value I put on what goes up in the Stormhorns Explore area, I still put Shadowfell that have Saltmarsh. However, I know other people would disagree and really, really like the story in Saltmarsh, which I liked as well. I think the Saltmarsh story is better than the story that's in the Shadowfell expansion. So I could see that. Some people feel really immersed in Saltmarsh, particularly if you maybe played that in pen and paper. It is a classic module, so there's a lot of nostalgia there for some players. So you could certainly argue for Saltmarsh. There's a lot of really cool looking, like the Bullywugs are a really cool looking monster in Saltmarsh, although there were some new things introduced in Shadowfell as well that were, I think, equally cool. I think Griffins were first introduced in Shadowfell. So there's some cool new monsters in there as well. But in any case, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. If I was forced to rank it, I would rank Saltmarsh last. The other thing, also the other thing I have to mention though, obviously Saltmarsh is like way less in terms of price, which is another reason I don't think it's fair to compare these. I mean, Saltmarsh was like $20, whereas Feywild, Ravenloft, these things cost a lot more. So even like Shadowfell cost more. So that's another reason why it's not really fair to compare. So all in all, I would put Saltmarsh last if I was forced to rank it with these other expansions, but I don't think I would. I think it deserves to be in its own category, in its own box, apart from the full expansions. I don't think it's fair to compare them. And maybe in the future, if I hope they don't, but if they do another mini expansion, then we can compare Saltmarsh to that. But as far as comparing it to the other expansions, I wouldn't do it. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think below. Where would you rank Saltmarsh? I would be interested in reading that. That's going to be it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.